Welcome to another new episode. This is review of language education research. Hi, I am Sir Wilmer and I'm so glad that you can join me today. So be prepared and let's start. Right off the bat, we have here question number 1. Which of the following best describes a study that takes a specific approach and aims at testing an existing theory in language education research? A study identifying all pronunciation difficulties of Chinese students learning English. Letter B, a study comparing English and Chinese vowel sounds to determine influence of L1 on L2 learning. Letter C, a study that broadly observes classroom behaviors of English learners without a set hypothesis. And letter D, a study that surveys teachers' general attitudes towards language teaching strategies. If your answer is letter B, then you are correct. Here's why. Because this study takes a narrow and focused lens. It zeroes in on vowel sounds, and it's built to test hypothesis, which is what we are looking for. Now, the case here is that your first language, which is your L1, affects how you pronounce a second language, which is the L2. In addition to this is classic deductive research. You start with a theory and decide to study to confirm it or challenge it. Now, what about the other options? Letter A sounds good at first, but it's too general in scope. It's more about discovering difficulties than testing a specific theory. So it's more of hypothesis generating rather than hypothesis testing study. Letter C, this was a general classroom observation with no clear hypothesis in sight. Great for initial exploration, but not designed to test a theory. And letter D, while this one's interesting, but this option focuses on teacher attitudes, not on language phenomena tied to theoretical testing. It may use surveys, but doesn't involve testing specific linguistic theory. Number 2. You're a language teacher observing how a small group of ESL students adapt to classroom communication norms over a semester. You document their nonverbal behaviors, interactions, and shared classroom rituals. Your focus is on their cultural practices and how they develop learning. What type of research are you conducting? A. Phenomenology. B. Ethnography. C. Case study. And letter D. Quantitative research. If your answer is letter B, then you are correct. Ethnography is all about exploring culture, how people in a group behave, how they value, and how they interact within their environment. In this case, you're watching ESL students adapt to classroom norms over time. You're noticing rituals, shared gestures, and group dynamics. You're doing exactly what ethnographers do, which is observing people in their natural environment to understand how culture shape one's behavior. Now, what about the other options? A. Phenomenology. It is all about individual life experiences. It dives into what people feel and perceive, often through interviews. It's personal and introspective. When we say introspective, we are gathering data from the previous records, experiences, and such. Not so much about shared group behavior. Letter C, case study. Another good guess. A case study could definitely involve your group of ESL students, but it's more about a specific instance or bounded system, like one program, one classroom, or one student explored deeply in different angles. While it could include natural behaviors, it's not the primary focus here. And letter D, quantitative research. Well, definitely not, because that's the world of numbers, statistics, and measurable variables. Think of test scores, surveys, or attendance data. In this scenario, you are not crunching numbers. You are watching, listening, and interpreting behaviors in a context. Number 3, a researcher is investigating whether Filipino high school students' reading comprehension improves after a new phonics-based intervention. She uses pre and post tests and calculates the statistical differences to test her hypothesis. Now, which type of research is being conducted? Letter A, applied research. Letter B, qualitative research. Letter C, pure research. And letter D, conceptual research. If your answer is letter A, applied research, then you are correct. Now, applied research is all about solving real-world problems using proven methods or principles. In this case, our researcher is testing phonics-based intervention to see if it improves reading comprehension. She uses data, statistics, and testings. Now, what about the other options? Letter B, qualitative research. Well, nope. That's more about words, not numbers. Think of interviews, focus groups, stories, and observations. In this case, our researchers working with test scores and the statistical differences. So this one's out. Letter C, peer research. This kind of research is done for the sake of knowledge itself, usually in labs or theoretical studies. It doesn't always have an immediate practical use. In our case, our researcher is solving a real world problem, which is improving how students read, so peer research isn't a match here. Letter D, conceptual research. This research sticks to developing or refining ideas, and theories usually with literature reviews, thought experiments, and hypothetical models. No actual testing or measuring involved. Again, not what we're looking for. Moving on to number 4, imagine you're tracking the vocabulary development of grade 4 students over 5 years to determine how their word knowledge grows with age. You collect data from the same students each year. Which research design are you using? Letter A, exploratory research, B, case study, C, longitudinal research, and letter D, laboratory research. If your answer is letter C, longitudinal research, then you are correct. Now, this is exactly what it sounds like. It's long. But more importantly, it follows the same participants over time to observe how something changes. In this case, that something is vocabulary development. You're not just taking a snapshot, you're making a full length documentary of language growth. Now, what about the other options? Exploratory research? Well, not quite. Exploratory research is for when you don't fully understand the problem yet. You're gathering informations, maybe forming a hypothesis, but you're not tracking development over time. So this one's not it. Letter B, case study, looks at a specific event or case. That's when you take a deep dive into a particular case, a person, a classroom, or maybe a school. It's rich in detail, but again, it's not about long term change. So, case study isn't the best fit here. And letter D, laboratory research. Now, that's kind of research you do in controlled setting. Think of white coats, test tubes, or lab simulations. But in our case, it's happening in school, in real classroom over real years. So, nope, not the lab base. Number 5, you are a senior high school student interested in how social media affects grammar use among teenagers. You consider this your research topic, but you have limited access to survey tools and only have 2 months before submission. Which guideline for selecting a research topic is most at risk here? Letter A, interest. Letter B, relevance. C, magnitude. And letter D, ethical issues. If your answer is letter C, magnitude, then you are correct. Now, magnitude refers to whether the topic is manageable within your time and resources. Since you lack tools and time, the topic might not be feasible right now, but it's still relevant and interesting. Now, what about the other options? Letter A, interest. It is still present there, you're still passionate about it, but the thing is you don't have much enough time and resources. Letter B, relevance. Yes, it's still a valid topic or issue to discuss in your research. And letter D, ethical issues, might exist in every study but aren't the core problem here. Number 6, which step in formulating a research problem focuses on turning a broad idea into specific researchable question. Letter A, identifying broad subject area. Letter B, formulate objectives. Letter C, double check the scope. And letter D, raise research questions. If your answer is letter D, then you are correct. This step involves narrowing down a broad idea into specific researchable questions. After identifying a general topic, the researcher needs to develop precise question that guides this study. These research questions form a foundation for the entire research process because they will determine what data needs to be collected and how it will be analyzed. Now, what about the other options? Letter A, identifying broad subject area. This is the first step in formulating a research problem. It involves choosing a general topic or field. At this stage, the topic is still too wide and undefined to guide actual research. Letter B, this step happens after raising or formulating research questions. Objectives are the specific goals of the study aims to achieve, and they are derived from the research questions, of course. While important, formulating objectives doesn't narrow the topic, it helps us structure how to answer the questions. Letter C, this is more of refining a review step. It involves ensuring the topic and questions are feasible in terms of time, resources, and relevance. This step does not help in creating specific research question, but rather making sure that the chosen problem is practical and appropriately scaled. Number 7. What is the best way to improve a review of related literature that only summarizes each source without connecting them? Letter A. Add more articles to have a longer review section. Letter B. Turn your summaries into bullet points for easier reading. Letter C. Analyze how the source agree or disagree and draw broader conclusions. Letter D. Replace scholarly articles with blogs and opinions pieces from students. If your answer is letter C, then you are correct. Because a good RRL, or the review of related literature, is not just a list of summaries. It is a synthesis. You're expected to look at how the studies relate. Do they support one another? Do they contradict? Or are there any trends, themes, or gaps in the research? This is how you establish a scholarly conversation and justify the need for your own study. Now, looking at the other options, letter A, more isn't always better. We should stick to quality over quantity. What you need is a deeper analysis and not just an extra content. Letter B, well, that might make it easier to read, but it doesn't encourage critical thinking or thematic connection between the studies. And letter D is the big no that undermines your study academic credibility. Stick with peer-reviewed and scholarly resources. Number 8, which type of quantitative research aims to determine whether a statistical relationship exists between two or more variables without manipulating them? Letter A, correlational research. Letter B, descriptive research. Letter C, experimental research. And letter D, quasi-experimental research. If your answer is letter A, then you are correct. Correlational research examines the relationship between two or more variables without changing them. For example, let's say you're studying if screen time is related to GPA. It shows association, not cause. Remember that correlation isn't equal to causation. On the other hand, we have descriptive research. It only describes what exists. For example, how many students use phones daily, but doesn't explore relationships. Letter C, this is the test cause and effect by manipulating variables and using random assignments. Now, this is the opposite of the correlational research. And letter D, quasi-experimental research, similarly to experimental, but without random assignment, it still involves manipulations or manipulation of the variables. For number 9, we are almost done. Which part of the quantitative research paper is responsible for presenting the data findings, including statistical tables and figures? A, methodology. B, discussion. C, results. And letter D, conclusion. If your answer is C, results, then you are correct. Now, this section presents the data, including the tables, the charts, the statistical results, like the mean median mode, t-test, standard deviation, or correlation. It shows what the data revealed, but doesn't interpret it. Okay? It just put into figure and descriptive manner. On the other hand, methodology, it explains how. It answers the question how the research was done, the designs, use, the tools, the data collection, not the actual findings. We have here also discussion. Now, in discussion, this is where we interpret the results, explaining their meaning and links them to research question and literature. And letter D, conclusion, of course, summarizes the findings and suggests the implications for the future research, not the place for detailed data. On to the last item, number 10. Which type of statistical treatment is appropriate when the data does not meet the assumptions of normality and equal variance? Letter A, descriptive statistics. Letter B, inferential statistics. Letter C, non-parametric test. And letter D, Bayesian statistics. Now, if your answer is letter C, non-parametric test, then you are correct. Now, before we discuss what is non-parametric test, let's try to break it down with you so you can understand it better. In quantitative research, many common tests like the t-test or the ANOVA fall under parametric tests, a subset of inferential statistics. These parametric tests require that your data meets some key assumptions. The data should be normally distributed and have homogeneous variance, meaning to say that means equal spread across groups. Now, but what if your data doesn't follow those assumptions? Maybe your sample is too small or your data is skewed, and that is where the non-parametric comes in. These tests are designed to work without the strict assumption that parametric tests require. They analyze your data differently, often based on the ranks or medians instead of the means. Okay? So now, what about the other options? Descriptive statistics. These are great for summarizing data, like means, medians, standard deviations, but they don't test hypotheses or compare groups. Inferential statistics, while this includes many parametric tests, remember that parametric tests assume normality and equal variance. So if your data violates this, typically inferential tests may lead to you as they are violated. And letter D, Bayesian statistics, pretty new word for us. Bayesian methods are powerful for updating probabilities as new data comes in, but they don't specially address issues like non-normality or unequal variance the way non-parametric tests do.